Thanks, Josh. Those are God's words, and we're going to look at that story shortly. If I could just share with you again what we're envisioning this year at church. So at the beginning of this year, we envisioned that we would grow in number, and as we reach out to people, that would lead to more people joining in. That we would grow in maturity, and as we follow Jesus, there's areas where we need to grow, and then we would grow in service as well, so that we would step up and help in different ways. And so this month in November, we've talked about this vision that God has for us. And looking back on this year, I'm so thankful. I've just got a couple of pics that Carlos has provided. This was from Friday. So this was the 180 youth group. Lots of smiling faces. There was a big gathering, lots of newcomers, and just so thankful for that gathering on Friday nights. So I think what we've realized this year is how helpful it is to have a space like this. Even if you go to a Christian school, to have a place where you can be with others and be centered around Jesus and God's words, and to be encouraged together. And that's grown so much this year. And so just thankful for 180. Here's another example. This is from ladies just yesterday, so this is fresh. So I think at Shane and Angie's place. Just a lovely time again over food, just enjoying that time together. Really, it's one in many gatherings this year, just to support each other with prayer and to get wisdom from God's words. That's been happening all throughout this year. And so really thankful for the growth there. I believe God's brought the growth, not just in our attendance, but the variety in our gathering. About a year ago, we started seeing strangers come in, people we didn't know but just came in, people who've been seeking. They've come from other communities, different religion, but just seeking. Some of our friends were brought along as well this year. I think we've been seeing a growth in maturity, just knowing God more, living out God's words. We don't really get a sense of growth unless it's been tested in some way. And so we've been stress tested as well, maybe in our personal life, but also in the way we run church as well. That's been stress tested. We've had growth in the service as well. So in other words, when we ask ourselves, what can I do? How can I give? Whom can I help? We've seen that happen as well in the service. And so this month, we opened up God's words. We started with the end of the Bible, looking at Revelation, the last book. And at the last book, it shows a vision of heaven, being together with God. And the people that are gathered around Jesus there, they're all identified by one thing: they've been saved. And that's what sets them apart. They've been rescued. And then we looked at following Jesus' path. Jesus talks about, if you want to be great in my kingdom, then you need to serve and put others before yourself. And you can only really do that if you are being served and rescued by Jesus. So that's Jesus' path. Last week, Russ spoke about Jesus' community, specifically focusing on hospitality, just making a space for someone, either at your home or over coffee, and reaching out to someone in friendship. That was a great challenge for us. I've been challenged thinking about these messages. Like Jesus' followers, his original followers, we might have our own personal ambitions, things that we dream about, or we would like to see happen, our own personal vision. And when I look at what Jesus does and what he talks about, that can challenge my personal ambitions, right? And that can be a threat, but in a good way. We might be seeing this and might be feeling unable, like, I would like to do more, I would like to give, or I would like to help, but I feel unable or not ready. For some of us, it's a feeling of there's just something I need to take care of before I can really follow Jesus. Okay? That it's maybe not the right time in your mind. And maybe some of us, we're feeling discouraged or just feeling low, and it's been difficult for us to really respond. And so what I've tried to do, especially this month, is to come back to really this message, which is, this is from a song, an old song. Jesus paid it all. All right? That's the good news in the Bible, that Jesus took our guilt upon himself. Our failures, our weaknesses, our struggles, put it on himself. What we've done wrong, he put it upon himself on the cross. And he paid it all, past, present, and future. That's incredible grace. And it says, all to him I owe, right? It's not that I'm trying to pay back God, like I have some kind of obligation there. It's not like that. It's because I've been set free of that penalty for my sins, and because I've been forgiven, that I want to live for God. I want to live that life that I couldn't live before. All to him I owe. It's that loyalty. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. So this actually comes from the Bible, and it's talking about deep transformation, right? Because whenever we make those wrong choices, it has an impact on others, but it also impacts ourselves. And we can carry that with us for a long time. But the hope of the good news is that God can actually make a change in yourself, right? A change from crimson stain to white as snow. And I think, I hope that if you're a follower of Jesus, you have a sense of this, that my life was going this wrong direction before, but I'm being turned around. There's something changing here. I hope you have a sense of that. I want to encourage that. Deep transformation. When I put this together, that helps deal with my discouragements or my questions, my inadequacies. It helps to clarify for me what's the right way to go. Coming back to the good news of what Jesus has done for me. So can I just share with you this story that we just read about this man who was possessed by demons and how Jesus healed him? Let me just walk this through with you this morning. First of all, in this story, we definitely see the power of evil. So if you have the story in front of you, it's in Mark chapter 5. Welcome to keep it open to you. It's a classic story in the Gospel, Mark chapter 5. Partly because it's so unusual. It's freaky, right? It's a bit scary. And so it's the kind of story you don't forget. Mark chapter 5, and you see the power of evil here. Verse 1 says, they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. This is a different region, a different place where they normally go. And immediately Jesus is confronted by this man. And it reminds me of some of us who have come from another place, right? We've come from another region or country, and you can remember what it used to be like. Maybe there was corruption, at a scale that you wouldn't believe. Corruption, right? Or maybe there was danger or hostility that you don't see here in Sydney. And one of us was sharing recently how it felt like it's all around you in this other place. A sense of evil, a sense of being isolated. Jesus and his followers come over to this other place, and they're confronted with a different kind of evil. Right, what is it? Verse 2. There met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Now, the other place where I work is near a cemetery. And so I drive by there a lot. And at the cemetery, you see people there paying their respects, but you don't normally see people in that space. In fact, just last week I saw someone walking their dog there, and I just thought, oh, that just doesn't seem to fit. Most people, they don't spend a lot of time at the cemetery. It says this man met Jesus out of the tombs. In other words, he was hanging out there. He was living there, sleeping there. He has an unclean spirit. That's talking about someone who's been possessed or dominated by an evil spirit, or what we call a demon. Now, if you're used to the Bible stories, we accept this, but there's many people that don't. And there is the modern view on this story that, speaking as a modern person, this is an ancient story, ancient culture, and so in those old days, people would attribute their psychological problems as spirits, spirits afflicting me. Whereas today, in our modern, world, we would call this mental illness, right? And that's a modern view. And it kind of looks down on the story, because if you keep reading the gospel story, what you find is that Jesus actually healed various kinds of illnesses. So there were physical problems that Jesus healed, like blindness or lameness or being deaf. But Jesus also healed mental illness as well. There's a kind of illness that is described as madness, all right? People who were touched in some way. And Jesus healed people like that too. So there was an awareness that there are various kinds of issues going on. It wasn't just a blanket statement that it's all demonic. There was awareness that there are physical and mental illnesses. But in this story, there is another kind of affliction going on here. Okay? It's more than physical or mental, it's spiritual. And in verse 3 it says, he lived among the tombs. No one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. So try to picture what that would be like. Now, maybe you've seen an incident where someone was on a substance of some kind and required multiple people to subdue them. That definitely can happen. It could be alcohol, it could be some kind of drug. It requires a lot of people to subdue this kind of person, right? But there's something else that could be involved here. Even these days, sometimes you read these accounts or stories of criminals or people that have been really afflicted, and something that they often describe is the sense of hearing another voice or multiple voices, right? And what's that about? Right? There's some mystery there. Can it be more than just mental illness when you're hearing other voices like this? And this person's got this incredible strength. It's troubling, it's terrifying. A while back I was on the train and this young man came on into the carriage and he was making these loud noises, and it was kind of disturbing, and you could see everyone feeling a bit uncomfortable about it. And then he exited the carriage, went to the next one, did the same thing. And I later saw that person's face on the news. He'd actually committed a murder in the city. He'd killed a young woman. And I was always struck by that, There'd been some process there that this person had gone through that was just spiraled until he committed murder. When you see characters like that, right, it makes you want to stay away from them. And so here this person is isolated. He lives among the tombs. It also says he lived out on the mountains. The fact that he lived among the tombs would suggest the darker interest that he wanted to hear from these voices. And we don't know the backstory, but the fact that he was there could indicate that darker interest. And he was living on his own, could not be restrained. Verse 5 says he was always crying out with a loud voice, cutting himself with stones. night and day. Now, this is a problem for people who take that modern view that it's just mental illness, right? Or maybe this is just a biological issue, so it needs medicine, it needs therapy, it needs education. There may be, even on a philosophical level, some people would say evil is just a social construct. Okay, it's just what people say it is. But this is a real problem, because when you see someone like this, you have to ask the question, is this kind of evil just mental illness? Right? If you say there's no spiritual, there's no supernatural, then it really challenges you when truly evil things happen. So a month ago, we looked at those terrorism incidents in Israel and just the brutality that was happening there. And when you see some of the terrible things that were done there, did that just require therapy to take care of? Right? Were they just kind of out of their head momentarily? Is that what happened? Or is there something deeper going on? How would you describe other atrocities, in history, like what the Nazis did in World War II? Was that just, something for a psychologist to take care of? It really challenges you when evil things truly happen. If we just say this is just biological, this is what happens in the process of evolution, that also challenges us, because if it's just natural, then how can we say it's wrong? So this really challenges us, I think, with the modern mindset, that I think there's more going on here. Something we see about the power of evil is that this person received power. He was physically strong, but it also took away from him. It reduced him as a human. He got something that he wanted. He had some kind of dark interest, and he got something for that. But he also lost part of himself, right? He's alone. He's living in the tombs. He's cutting himself. He's always crying out. And that's what evil does. Evil gives you something, but it will always take something out of you. Now, we look at this story, and right away I find it hard to identify with this character. Okay? This person is extremely dangerous. He's super strong. He's harming himself. And I find it very hard to relate to that. It's like seeing the news about the terrorists and thinking, well, how could they do such a thing, right? But have you ever maybe given in a little bit to evil? Right? Maybe not to that extent, but have you ever given in a little bit to evil? What's happened there? I think what we find is whatever we're really seeking after, that is what becomes our master. You don't have to be naked and living in the cemetery to find that out. But what I really go after in my life, that eventually becomes my master. And it will take me to a place that I did not originally envision. That's what evil does. I go after something and it takes over me. Have we ever listened to a lie and become deceived? And we carry that lie with us so that we've deceived ourselves. Where did that lie lead us? Right? I never get what I'm looking for, or I've tried so hard, right? It doesn't seem to work for me. I can't trust people. I don't know how we're going to do this. We say these things to ourselves all the time, and where does it lead us? It takes over us. It leads to addiction, because we look for other refuges, other comforts. It leads us to bitterness, because we see it in front of us all the time. We can't see properly. We waste ourselves. It's a path of self-destruction. Whatever we seek most becomes our master. Now, if I've been saved by Jesus, this is where I really have to stop and ask myself, what would my life be like without Jesus? And this is an individual question. You kind of have to reflect for yourself. If I'm a follower of Jesus, what's that lie that I've had to confront, right? What's that struggle or addiction or false hope that I've run to where I'd be stuck without Jesus? Well, then we see the mercy of Jesus here. In verse 6 it says, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. Crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" There's one more thing about this demon-possessed character. He's got spiritual insight. He sees something that the most religious people in the story cannot recognize. He sees Jesus for who he really is. He calls him Son of the Most High God. He falls down on his knees before Jesus. Now that's not loving worship, right? That's recognizing that there's someone greater in front of him. Spiritual insight. But then he goes on to say in verse 6, "I adjure you by God, do not torment me." Now that's interesting too. And this is again another insight about evil here. Satan lets this man see that there is a higher power. There's someone more powerful. That's Jesus. But Satan won't let the man see the mercy of Jesus. We know that because what does he say to Jesus? "Do not torment me." In his view, his warped view, he just thinks Jesus is there to basically put an end to him. Do not torment me. He can't see Jesus' grace and mercy. For us, we get affected by this as well when we recognize that there's someone over us, there's a higher authority, but we feel a bit torn by that. And we recognize the authority, but we're not seeing the mercy. And so we say things like, well, if I give in to God, that means I'm going to have to give up something here, right? But it feels like I'm being tormented. It feels like I'm suffering. I'm in pain. And this is what happens because I'm under this higher power. I'm seeing the authority, but I'm not seeing the mercy. Now, Jesus was saying to the man, "Come out, you unclean spirit." Jesus asked, "What is your name?" The man said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Legion refers to a multitude. We're not exactly sure how many specifically, but many, many voices speaking to this person. Many, many voices. And he begged Jesus earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now again, there's some mercy here because Jesus is dealing with this character. He is taking time with this character. There's a conversation happening here. Now it says there was a great herd of pigs that were feeding there, and the voices, the demons, begged Jesus, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. It says the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned. Now I always get fascinated with this because I'm not sure what's all going on in this moment, okay? We just don't have a lot in the Bible that talks about how spirits operate and what the effects they can have on people and beasts. But we do know a couple things here. First of all, those demons, those voices, were completely under Jesus' authority. Okay, there was no wiggle room for them to do a deal. Okay, they could only do what Jesus allowed them to do. That's interesting. When they begged to go into the pigs, that was their appeal for some way out. Jesus let them out. But that was also their doom. Because when they entered the pigs, they were all destroyed. That's interesting as well. I'm sure there are more questions around this. I'm happy to chat more about it later. But it just shows the power of Jesus in this moment, that these spirits have come out. And it's so evident because these pigs have all taken off over the cliff. What did that look like? What did that sound like? Right? Now, there's something else about Jesus' mercy here. Remember how this all happened? It happened because Jesus came across the water. Right? In other words, this is not where Jesus normally operates. But he's come all this way, and he's got off at the shore to meet this person. It's a marvelous mercy here. Because this poor afflicted man, the herdsman, the pigs, it was just a normal day for them. But Jesus comes into their situation. And with this power and mercy, he brings transformation. For some of us, it might feel like we have struggled for a long time. There's something that we've had to deal with for a very long time. And it may feel like it's not going to change. And you may even have opened yourself up to other voices that would tell you it's hopeless, that there's no way out of this, it's always going to be this way. Can I remind you what Jesus does here? He comes across the water. He looks for this person. He steps in and changes the person. Now, there's one post note here in verse 14. The herdsmen fled. They told it in the city and in the country. The people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus. They saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there. So, how do we know that Jesus made the difference? It was evident. You could see it. And they saw this person who was previously restless and up all hours of the night, crying out. You can't reason with him. You can't restrain him. What's he doing? He's seated. He's still. He's got clothes on. And he's in his right mind. Jesus' power here. But it says that they were afraid. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Why were they afraid? You would think they would not be afraid because this man was now healed. I think maybe two reasons why they were afraid. First of all, these are Gentiles. They're not familiar with God's words. They're pagan and superstitious. So they're aware that there is a greater power here. So they're afraid of Jesus' power. But I think they're also afraid because of what they lost. In verse 16 it says, those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. Because when Jesus allowed the spirits into the pigs took off, and that was their business. The pigs, the livestock, that was money to them. That was their jobs gone over the cliff. And so just as the demon-possessed man begged Jesus, these people who are not demon-possessed begged Jesus, but they begged Jesus to leave. Isn't that interesting? Because it tells us that they were so afraid of Jesus and of what they had lost that they valued the pigs more than the person. Now, if you had someone terrorizing you in your community, you would think that would be the big news, right? This person, can you believe it, is transformed? It wasn't the big news. The big news, if there was a newspaper in those days, it would have been city ruined, right? The business is gone. That would have been the big news, not the man. So they begged Jesus, please go. You've cost us too much. You can't be here anymore. What else are you going to take from us, Jesus? Isn't that interesting? And then we get to Jesus' mission. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged Jesus that he might be with him. Now, 3 times there's begging here. When he's got demons, he's begging. The people are begging Jesus, and now the healed man is begging Jesus that he might be with him. The people did not want Jesus around. It would cost too much. They're aware of that higher authority, right? But they can't see the mercy. But the man, He wants to be with Jesus. He's saying, Jesus, it's your voice I need more than any of those other voices. It's your voice I need. I want to follow you. Now, humanly speaking, imagine the potential of having such a character with you. Talk about public, instant credibility, right? This man was known as a menace. Now, he's rational, all right? And he's been saved by Jesus. Imagine his potential for showing people and for giving credibility. But what does Jesus do? Verse 19, he did not permit him. So the very first thing Jesus does with this new follower who's being healed is to say, you can't go. He puts a limit on him. He restrains him. You can't go. He closes the door. But he does say to the man, he gives him a mission. Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. Jesus says, you can't go with me right now, but this is how you can serve. Others need to be rescued. Others where you live, they need the Lord's mercy too. And how do we know that Jesus has really healed the man? It says, he went away and began to proclaim how much Jesus has done for him. He does exactly what Jesus wants. And everyone marveled. He goes and serves Jesus on Jesus' terms. And he tells people, that was who I used to be. But the Lord has done so much for me. I've received mercy. Me of all people. He can't hold back. That's what gets me up in the morning, when I think of what Jesus has done for me. The Bible says we love him because he first loved us. Now within that one line is a lifetime of wonder. We love him because he first loved us. If we were to keep reading, we would find out that Jesus returns to this area, the Decapolis. It's a region of towns. The next time Jesus comes back, there are thousands looking for Jesus. How did that happen? Jesus gave this one person a mission. So let me ask you, is there something in your own life where you need mercy? Right? You might agree that God's real, but can you accept that there's something that you're doing or something you're not doing and you need God's mercy? That you might face up to it, turn back to Jesus. Is there a relationship that needs mercy? If you've received forgiveness, is there someone that you need to extend kindness to? And then where has God placed you? Where there's someone you can encourage and point to God. You know, we can all be taken over by different visions or distracted. There are times when we're discouraged or down. Don't let those circumstances, don't let your status, don't let those dreams blind you to who we really are, our spiritual need. And don't let it blind you to how much God has done for you. Right? That's the power we need. Let me pray with you. Lord, we're so thankful for your great compassion. And we've had a sense of your transforming power to save. Lord, you've promised that all those who come to you, you will not cast away. And if we're broken or unable, all the better, because then you can really work. And Lord, we pray that out of your words this morning, we would be humbly confident in your rescue, and that you would bring us back to your presence, get us back on track to your mission. In Jesus' name, amen.